Hello everyone, just Goran here and welcome back to another Planet Zoo real life inspiration video. Today we are looking at brown bears. This counts for both the grizzly bear and the Himalayan brown bear. Neither of which are really that common in Europe, so I've never seen either of them. So we're just looking at some generic brown bears, starting over here with what's probably the worst enclosure in the video from Parc Animalier de Bouillon, where we've got a relatively simple enclosure, some concrete over here surrounding a pool, a simple fence with a bunch of hot wire to prevent the bears from climbing it, a bunch of holes that probably have been dug by the bears to lay in. As we can see over there, one is chilling in a hole. We've got a small cave over there for them to maybe hibernate in, I'm not sure. But yeah, this is the entire enclosure, so here you can see why it is probably one of the worst for this video. It's just not that big. We've got two bears in here and it's very open, very barren, not a lot of shade. It's out from that little shelter bit within the cave. Yeah, I don't know, it's just not that spectacular or anything. But moving along, we are in the domain of the caves of Hun, where we have this large, beautiful enclosure. Again, quite a simple fence around there with a lot of hot wire, and I think there's also hot grass mixed in the rock over there to prevent them from also going into that moat, and just lots of hot wire in general around there, but definitely a really cool open enclosure with a great view into it. We can also see another bit of a pool down there. Over here the fence turns into a wall with some overgrowth on there, and after that you get to this enclosure, which is still for the bears, and we can see we just have this U-moat that's keeping the bears from us, and that's all. And just how close you can get to the bears over here, it's absolutely insane. I love this. There was also another path going around the top side of this enclosure, which I didn't take that day. Maybe if I ever come back here I will. I think that also led to kind of a viewing tower looking over the other enclosure we saw earlier. But yeah, this is just absolutely awesome, and I love everything about this. It's super cool. It's a little bit like, oh, what if the bear falls into that moat? But other than that, yeah, here's another good view of the fence, and that's it for Caves of Hun. So let's move on to Dierenrijk over here, and we're starting off not at the bears but at the wolves over here, because back in the day the bear habitat and the wolf habitat actually used to be one. The bears were mixed together with the wolves, and one day in a tragedy one of the bears actually killed one of the wolves, and shortly after I think they were eventually separated. Overall, this is something that's done a lot in zoos. Bears mixed with wolves is enriching for both of the species, but I think Dierenrijk ultimately decided against it because they just didn't have that much space for the animals to get away from each other, which is why maybe the conflict happened. You can never be sure with these things, it's always wild animals. But anyway, we could also see really cool, the bears make full use of their pool, and this feature, which is unique to Dierenrijk, where we have a little picnic bench where you can have your meal together with the bears, which is just super cool and awesome. I absolutely love this so much. Over here we can also have a small peek at their backstage and at the gates into the enclosure, but that is pretty much all for Dierenrijk. Definitely really cool enclosure still. Yeah, super awesome. Next up we have Dierenpark Hoenderdaell, where we also have a very simple enclosure. It's not too small or anything. There's 2 yards because these bears actually at one point had offspring, which is not something you see a lot in zoos. Generally zoos don't really breed with their bears. Most of the bears in zoos are rescues, so you'll often not breed with them because then you just have more bears to take in, whereas if you don't breed with your bears, you can, if they pass away, you can take in more rescues and give them a nice home. So that's something you don't see a lot. You don't see a lot of baby bears for that reason, I suppose. Anyway, over here at Monde Sauvage, again, a pretty simple habitat, lots of mesh and hot wire keeping the bears from escaping. Some nice piles of logs for them to, I guess, climb on a little bit, but other than that, nothing too special here. So let's move on to the next zoo, which is the zoo of Osnabrück, where we have a beautiful enclosure. I absolutely love the look of this. I love the rock work around it. I love the elevation. I love the bear. You might notice something interesting about this bear, it doesn't really look like any of the other bears that we've seen. That's because this is not just a brown bear, it is actually a mix between a brown bear and a polar bear. So pretty interesting species right there. It's its own little thing. It's not something, once again, you see very often, because I'm guessing it happened as some kind of a mistake back in the day when they still mixed polar bears and brown bears. That's also not something you would really see nowadays anyway. So yeah, I'm guessing this species will not be in zoos for much longer. And what's also cool here is how the water from the reindeer enclosure flows into the bear enclosure. Super neat. But anyway, next up we have Ouwehands Dierenpark, where we are starting off in this little village area where there is a lot of education about the bears and about the bear forest, which is what this area is called, because this is not just an enclosure, it is a forest. It is absolutely huge, and there's so many bears in here. And once again, the focus here is definitely on rescues. Ouwehands is actually actively organizing rescues of bears that are in unbearable situations. Sorry, that's a bad joke on a very serious topic. But yeah, over here you can quote unquote buy a piece of the bear forest and your name will be displayed here. And by doing so, you're helping out their initiative of rescuing bears. Now, anyway, let's enter the bear forest. And the first thing we see is this constellation over here, which is like, I guess, the Big Dipper, Little Dipper, which is also called the Big or the Small Bear, at least in Dutch. I think it's also the case in English, depending on where you are. So that's a really cool introduction to the bear forest, I suppose. You can also see we have this ropes course going across the bears, which is super, super cool. Always love that. But you can already see, right, this is massive. It is a forest. There is so much space for these bears to roam around. There's also a lot of bears in here, granted, but they are all rescues. They are all taken from horrible conditions like circuses or roadside zoos in God knows which countries where the animal rights conditions are just not great. And it's just so nice to see them be able to live out the rest of their days in such a lovely habitat and with proper care from people who actually care about them. So yeah, that's just really nice. We can also see, again, a lovely water feature over here and some bears in the background. And this spiraling down area where there's a lot of education about what the zoo does, transporting bears. Here's some education about brown bears in general, and this is where we also transition from the elevated path to a more on the ground path, getting different views of the bears and also the wolves, because yes, this is also a shared enclosure between bears and wolves. As I said, it can be enriching for both species, and this habitat is definitely large enough from them to be able to evade each other. Over here we can also see a lovely little stream of water which feeds into that water feature that we saw earlier, and behind the water feature we can actually see my favorite bear here, or at least the only one that I can really recognize. This is Igor. I think he's very iconic thanks to this lighter bit of fur around his neck that makes him very easy to recognize, which is why I appreciate you, Igor. You're very cool and you have a cool name. Anyway, over here we can see more of these little caves and huts for the bears to hibernate in. I think that hut especially is hot commodity. Also in the donation system, you can always see people buy the plots of land that actually have interesting stuff on them, which is it's interesting to see the human behavior there. And over here we can see the backstage of the bears. When bears are first let loose into the bear forest, they tend to stick more to that place, but as they get more comfortable they will go out more, which is really cool to see. Anyway, next up we are in Pairi Daiza, and the first thing we're checking out is this cave over here. It looks pretty neat, and we've got this glass viewing area into the bear enclosure, which once again is pretty massive, but there is also lots of bears in here, and once again also wolves as well, so definitely the space is needed. We can also see lots of windows, because this is actually one of the enclosures at the resort of Pairi Daiza. Over here you can see the entrances to the little homes, these kind of hobbit hole like homes. You can actually book one of these rooms. It's just a hotel room, and over the night you will have a view of the bear enclosure from the comfort of your bed, which is just super, super cool. It's a lot more expensive than the hotel that I slept at, but definitely I think worth it. Anyway, we followed the path upwards where we've got a more unobstructed view, no glass and stuff. We are just looking down on the beautiful bears and wolves both in here. There's some binoculars. There is a long path because it is a long enclosure, and we can see all of it from here. Super cool. Yeah, pretty great enclosure. I've heard people complain that there's too many bears in here, but I don't know, I think they have the space for it, and I've seen much worse enclosures overall. So also a nice bit of theming over here, a bear capture truck for the state patrol. Super cool. Yeah, so next up, Pakawi Park. Not gonna complain much today about Pakawi actually, because this is one of the few enclosures in Pakawi Park that I actually quite like, and they've got their own little bear forest area, and I think it's quite nice. It's hard to tell how big it is exactly because of all the foliage around. We are definitely in a foresty area once again, but just judging alone from the length of the enclosure, it is quite sizable, because this bridge that we're on goes on for quite a bit through this stretch of forest, so that already means it's a very long enclosure. And as we get to the edge of it here, to the end of it, we've got this kind of outlook over this lake, and all around that I think is all still part of the bear enclosure, so definitely lots of space for them here, and just a nice enclosure. It's just a bit of forest for these bears to call their home. I'm not sure how recent this is, but if this is the direction Pakawi is heading in, then who knows, maybe someday we won't have to complain as much about them. But anyway, next up we are in the Zoo of Wuppertal, where we see a lovely education sign about the giants of the north, or the brown bears, and we've got a lovely glass viewing area into them, where we can see their foresty enclosure. Definitely a bit barren over here in the winter, but I can imagine that in the summer this is super lush and beautiful like the other enclosures we've seen. Then we get to this wooden walkway over here, which is a bit deceptive because it's actually built on the same concrete walls that we see all around the exhibit. From a different viewing point you can tell that, but it works from a visitor perspective over here. It looks like you're just on this wooden walkway above the bears, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, from this viewing point you can kind of see all of the concrete that is built on in the distance there. But yeah, just a lovely exhibit over here. Once again, just a nice bit of forest. Pretty big fan of that. So next up we are in the Zonnegloed, where you can see some video playing over there about a bear that was born here. Hey, once again, a younger bear. I think when I got here it was already pretty grown up. But yeah, this is an animal sanctuary, and I'm pretty sure the story was that they rescued a bear that was pregnant, so it gave birth here and they had a baby bear, but they did not breed bears or anything like that, once again. So pretty simple enclosure, pretty flat, but still some nice elevation changes, some nice bit of log piles, some climbing structures, a small waterfall even, which is, I'm guessing, also some nice enrichment for the bears. Over here we can see the staff gate into it. But yeah, this is of course an animal sanctuary, a rescue center, so to say. So the enclosures are often a bit more on the simple side. I actually do appreciate how many nice viewing points they created here for the bears, or for the visitors actually. The viewing points are not for the bears necessarily. But yeah, it's just lovely to see the effort put in here, and yeah, all of these climbing structures and stuff are really quite nice. There's also this slide over here, quite interesting, I suppose. But yeah, 3 separate yards, all for the bears, lots of space, just a nice enclosure, nothing much more to say about that. So let's move on to the next zoo, and that's going to be the last for this video. We are in Zoo Erlebniswelt, where we are warned of this restricted wildlife area over here. Don't leave the roads, appreciate the animals from a distance. We're in this beautiful log cabin over here, where we have a view of this amazing bear enclosure. I absolutely love this one. There's some super unique faux rockwork all around here, really awesome theming, but still this wilderness type of feeling. Yeah, I don't know, it's just awesome. I absolutely love it. I will say, in some cases, I think they may have overdone it a little bit on all of that faux rock. There is quite a lot of it, and not all of it is up to the same amount of detail as the rest. But still, I do really like this enclosure. I think it is meant to be kind of a North American area. I guess the brown bears are kind of stand-in for grizzly bears here. Maybe they have some grizzly bear genes in them. I don't even know. They're generic brown bears. But yeah, over here we get some slightly rougher bits of faux rock. I also am not a huge fan of these very square windows kind of in the middle of the rock. I think that takes me out of the immersion a little bit. It does provide some nice views of the enclosure, albeit with the glass not being too clean in all places. But I don't know, it just looks off when you have this rock wall and then just this rectangular window in there, right? Like, that's not just me. I'm guessing it's a bit odd. I wish they could do a bit more with that, making it look a little bit more natural, I guess. But there's so much over here to see. You weave all around this enclosure, actually these enclosures, because I think it's 2 separate enclosures that they've got here. You know, I'm a sucker for habitats that slope up. Well, here we've got another beautiful example of that. Just a really nice looking enclosure. Super big fan of it. As we turn around over here, we're even entering a little themed area, Sam's Mine, which is a mine shaft that you walk through, with a beautiful emergency exit sign over there. And as we leave the mine, we get to even more viewing points of this enclosure. Over here there are these bridges going over this kind of watery area. I'm not sure if this is accessible to the bears. I'm pretty sure it is. There is like hot wire around the edges of this basin down here as well. But yeah, you can go over the rope bridge and look into this area. I think there is supposed to be like a waterfall over here that's a bit more intense than what's currently dripping down there. But I guess it was shut off for a moment. And then over here you've got more rectangular windows in the rocks, but also this little cave area, which I did quite like. I didn't mind the windows in here as much because you are just surrounded by all of this cave stuff. It works a little bit better. I think it will also be pretty cool to see the bears in here. Not sure why the hot wire around the windows is necessary though. That seems a little weird to me. I mean, it's already in a cave type thing. I don't know how it's going to climb out of there. But that was it for Zoom Erlebniswelt, and that will be it for this video. So I hope you got some bear inspiration out of it. If you want to see your name down here and see these videos as soon as I finish editing them, instead of having to wait to the Wednesday for them to come out, you can hit the join button. Otherwise, you could just subscribe and wait for the next one. See you then. Bye bye.